Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we ask that you be with us here in this place, that you speak your message unto us and transform our lives through your very word. Gracious Lord, may we experience the presence of your burning bush. May we hear your voice calling out to us and sending us to your task. It is for these things we pray. Amen. Our scripture lesson today, as you might have guessed, reminded me of when I was in elementary school and in middle school. And my greatest fear was of being picked last. I loved being team captain for that very reason. Because if I was team captain, then I got to design the team of my dreams. I got to design a team that I thought could win. Now my second fear, greatest fear in elementary and middle school, was that my friends would be team captains. Because my friends were probably better friends to me than I was to them. My friends, when they became team captains, they picked all of their friends. And they made a team out of their friends. And I worried about being on a team with just my friends because my friends tended to be the people who were picked last. Well, I was never picked last. I often was only picked first in basketball because I was about 5 inches taller than everyone else. I still always liked being on that winning team. And I always felt that when my friends picked teams, they always put together this team that had no chance at winning. It was a team of friends, sure, but all of the skilled players, all of the best players were all on that other team, and that always frustrated me because I loved to win. Moses, the main character of our story today, is one of those players, one of those people that I think probably would have been picked last, especially if I had been team captain or some of the other kids that like to win. He's not the first pick, and I can start to tell you why. Because when Moses was born, he kind of started life off in a hole to begin with. You see, when Moses was born, Pharaoh had issued a decree that all infant male children, all children below 2 years old that were males, that were Hebrews, were to be put to death. So Moses was born with a death sentence on his head. And his mother, who loved him so much, hid him for 3 months, keeping him quiet so that the Egyptians didn't discover his existence and then kill him. At the end of 3 months, his mother knew she could hide him no longer. And so she put little baby Moses in a wicker basket and sent him down the river Nile, and there he is discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, the daughter of the man who had put a death sentence on his head. And Pharaoh's daughter decides that she wants to keep this Hebrew baby. And Miriam, Moses' sister, thinking quickly, comes and tells the princess, "I know the perfect nursemaid for the child." And she has the princess call Moses' own mother to come and nurse the infant Moses. And so Moses grows up in the house of the man that sought his life as the son to that same man. Well, Moses didn't take long to figure out that he was an Egyptian. He probably noticed that his features were slightly different, that he just didn't quite look like mom and dad and all of his brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces. And he probably realized that he was a Hebrew. And one day, while he's out purveying the lands of Egypt, he notices that there's this Hebrew taskmaster, this Hebrew slave driver, beating a Hebrew slave. And something wells up inside of Moses, and he goes and he strikes this Egyptian and kills him. Well, Moses doesn't realize that people saw him, and the next day he finds two Hebrew slaves fighting with each other. And he tries to break them up, and they tell him, "Why should we listen to you? What are you going to kill us too, like you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses realizes that his secret is not so secret. And he worries that if his father and the Egyptians find out what he's done, that he will be put to death. And so Moses runs off into the wilderness. And he becomes a shepherd of sheep. A child of a slave sentenced to death, becomes a murderer, and then becomes an exile and a shepherd of sheep. This is the man that our story is about. The man whom we find at the beginning of our story is there shepherding sheep on the side of the mountain. And he sees a burning bush that is not consumed by the fire. And I got to admit, if I saw a bush burning that was not being consumed by fire, I think I would go investigate it as well. And so it's no wonder that Moses turns to look at this bush, and when he turns, suddenly the bush says his name. Now, I would already be interested in the burning bush, but I got to say that if the bush then started to speak to me, at that point I might think about leaving and getting out of there, and probably pretty quickly. And so I imagine that when Moses answers the bush and says, "Here I am," he's probably doing it with a good amount of fear and maybe a little confusion in his voice. And the bush responds, "Moses, come no closer, but remove your sandals, for the ground on which you walk is holy. I am the Lord your God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." And now Moses is all attention, and he hides his face for fear of continuing to look at this bush and seeing God there. And God continued, "Moses, I have heard the cries of my people, and I have decided to come down. And I am picking you, Moses, to go to Pharaoh and to tell him to let my people go." Well, I gotta say, if I was Moses, I wouldn't be very excited about this opportunity to serve God. First of all, God is sending him back to a country where he is a part of an enslaved people, a country where he's wanted for murder. And as a shepherd, he is going to approach the most powerful man in the world, a man who has the more wealth, more armies, more people backing him than anyone else. It's an unfair fight. Moses just got selected by God for the B squad. And they're about to go up against the A squad, and there is a big difference between varsity and the freshman team in this case. And he's a little worried. And he says to God, "God, who am I that you should send me?" And God, the ever great comforter, says, "I will be with you." And this is how you know that I will be with you. After you have accomplished this task, you'll come back here and worship me, and then you'll know that I was with you the entire time. Now, that doesn't sound that comforting to me. I really don't know how comforted I would be of somebody telling me, "Oh yeah, go ahead and do this, and once you have done it, then you'll know that I actually helped you do it all along." That doesn't tell me, that doesn't comfort those fears inside of me that say, how do I know that I can actually do this to begin with? You know what I mean? And so Moses comes up with another excuse. Well, God, if you send me, who am I going to tell them that sent me? Because, they only see me as a murderer. Who am I going to say? What authority am I going to use to tell them what to do? What name shall I give them? And it is at this point that God tells him that Yahweh sends you. And Yahweh translates to, I was who I was. I am who I am, and I will be who I will be. It is the strangest word in the Hebrew language. And it's strange because it is a form of the verb to be. Except that it is all three tenses of the word to be in one word. Which is why it translates really to, I was who I was, I am who I am, and I will be who I will be. No other word in the Hebrew language has all three tenses of time compressed into one, except for the name of God. This is Moses' opportunity. Moses, the most unlikely, the kid who is going to be picked last, is picked by the creator of the universe, the one who was before time, the one who is through time, and the one who will be after time ceases to exist. And he's picked to play for a team that looks like it has no shot at winning. And yet, it is a team that wins. Now, I think God picks his teams differently than I do. I think God picks his teams more like my friends. And I say that because I think God picks the players for his team based on what their hearts say. He picks the players whose hearts are for him, who could be called friends of God, much like my friends. He doesn't pick the biggest, the strongest, the best players always. He picks the players who will play for him. You see, I think that God could have easily taken that same burning bush and put it right down there in the middle of Pharaoh's court, and God could have spoken from that bush directly to Pharaoh himself and said to Pharaoh, I am the God of the Hebrews, I am the God of the universe, the creator of all things, and I demand that you let the Israelites go. And I think God, with his infinite power, could have made Pharaoh let the Israelites go, and Moses never even had to be a part of the equation. God could have picked Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, to be his envoy to Pharaoh to do what he wanted done. And that's who I would have picked if I wanted this mission accomplished. I would have picked the king of the most powerful army in the world to lead my team into freeing these people. But God picked Moses, a murderer, an exile, a Hebrew, a shepherd. And he won with Moses. He freed the Israelites. God has picked and called each and every one of us. I know that God has called you out because you are sitting here right now. Something in you this morning got you up and told you that you needed to be here in this place. And maybe it was your parents, or maybe it was tradition, or maybe it was your conscience, but somehow something drew you here to hear the voice of God speak into your life. You were called. And you may not feel like you are the most powerful person in the world. You may not feel like you are significant or talented. You may not feel like you have the energy to continue to serve God or to do whatever it is that God calls you to do. And yet God has chosen you. And God plans on winning with you as his star player. I don't know exactly what each of you are called to. I know what I have been called to. It is the only part of the plan that I know, and often that part of the plan is only revealed to me at last minute or sometimes even in retrospect. But I do know this, that whatever God has called you to do, it will look a little bit like the life of Jesus Christ. Because that is how God has us win, is he has us conquer the world through love. That in the face of hatred we love, in the face of starvation we offer food, in the face of dehydration we are water, in the face of sickness we are health, in the face of death we are life. And if you don't believe that you are called, let me remind you of some other people that God called throughout time. People that we wouldn't have expected, and yet that's who God picked. David, the youngest of 7 brothers, the boy among men, chosen to be king, the greatest king of Israel. The prophets, men who heard God one way and faced over 300 men preaching the exact opposite. Jesus Christ. A man born to a woman who until that point's name was unknown by anyone in the world. Who lived in the middle of nowhere in an occupied country. Dirt poor. Barely able to make it. And yet chosen to be the mother of God himself on earth. That same God who, as a Hebrew, as someone from the middle of nowhere, as a child of no one of significance, grew up and became king of all creation. And then who had a disciple, an apostle actually, who was known and notorious for murdering Christians. A man named Saul, who then became God's missionary to all of the Western world as the man Paul, and who converted more people to Christianity than anyone else. God picks the underdog, and he wins. Because that's who God is. He picks you based on your heart, on your potential, not on your skill, not on the fact that you are the biggest, the bravest, the best, but because you are who you are and who God made you to be. And you know God. And you hear God. My question to you is, when God is calling you from that burning bush, are you going to answer, "Here I am, Lord"? Or are you going to turn away? Are you going to allow your fears, your doubts, your concerns about your handicap set you back? Or are you going to play for the winning team? God, the God of all the universe, is calling you out. He has a task set aside for you and you alone, one that you and you alone will accomplish by his power. Will you take up his task? Will you complete his mission? Will you join me in living out a life of faith? Amen.